All Age Media is proud to present The Week Before, a show that encourages discussion, knowledge, and a bit of banter in between. Now presenting Jamie Dyer with this week's special guest.
My guest today is a university postgraduate student. Kate is on the line here. Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever to you.
Hello, how are you?
I am very well, thank you. So, anyway, we'll move on to the first round here, simply because I could ask her all sorts of different questions, but it does go into the discussion round. It's about university, because obviously I know Kay, when I was a student at university, we knew each other, and of course that was something in the region of like 6-7 years ago, and she, beyond me, went on to postgraduate education after undergraduate. So I'm asking really, what is the difference between the two of them?
The main difference that springs to my mind straight away, and it may seem like an obvious difference, but it is a very profound difference, and that is it is considerably harder. I hate to say it, but it is more academically challenging. You have to be more self-driven. It's a lot more open in terms of you don't have someone guiding you every step of the way. I mean, there's some guidance, but it's very much kind of you get out what you put in, and you have to plan, and you have to kind of outline your projects or your chosen subjects within the compulsory modules. It's not like the undergraduate where, particularly in the first year, you are given these kind of standard questions and things to explore. It's kind of very much about, okay, now I've done my undergraduate, what am I interested in and how can I take it forward? The second thing which makes it different is it is a lot harder to get funding for postgraduate education than it is for undergraduate education, but it is possible. And the third thing is people tend to be a lot older. So sometimes you'll get people that are already teaching that will do classes with you as well. People that have gone away from education and decided to come back, those sorts of things. Can't really think of anything else off the top of my head, really. I guess you can't really call yourself a fresher anymore.
Well, no.
I think it's an experience where you really get to kind of know your strengths, and kind of know what you're about, kind of in an academic and in a practical sense.
Yeah, I get that. And of course, the university, of course, we both attended, well, I used to attend and graduated from, and you attend, is of course the University of Chichester. What would you say was the kind of bonus to that? What are the strengths, do you think?
Well, being a University of Chichester graduate, going into postgraduate education, they do what they call alumni discount, which means that because I was already previous alumni and I'm doing it within 5 years of my undergraduate, I get a slight discount on the fees, which is always good. In terms of the uni strength, I would say arts, so dance, theatre, fine arts, and sports mainly. There's also a new media course coming out, which I think is a kind of combination of kind of sports journalism and media studies.
I did read that, yes.
So that's kind of coming up. Yeah, and I hope that they do get people enrolling for that, actually, because that does sound really interesting. The final thing I would say is quite a small university. So it's very kind of friendly and kind of you can approach people as an individual and kind of not feel so lost in the crowd.
I also found as well that even though they might not necessarily get as much funding as some of the larger universities, they made use of it. They've certainly tried to provide as many opportunities as they can, depending. I mean, they've also got the showroom, of course, which is not only a good source of revenue for the uni, but it's also a good opportunity for students.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've done some of my stuff in there. I can't believe I didn't think of that first off, actually, maybe just because it's been kind of a first nature to me, as it were. I'm a theatre student, by the way, for people that don't know. And of course, they've got the new academic and teaching building, which is apparently opening January 2017, I think, which will be... I'm not exactly sure how much money they got for that development, but it was quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I believe it will have a cinema within it and a new student union shop and kind of new dance studios and possibly... I remember reading something about computer facilities as well. So that's still going on. And that will be open next year.
I know that they're building all these different things, but then what happens to the other, the older facilities? I mean, you mentioned a new student union shop. I mean, you used to be able to walk past there. Certainly for me, you'd walk past there, grab a bite, go into lecture, and you thought, it was on your way to the lecture, as it were. It was all pretty much laid out quite simply. I do wonder what's going to happen to those facilities.
Not so sure about the shop, but I would like to think that things like the showroom and the dance studios that, already get plenty of use would remain that way, and this would kind of be an extension of, in kind of lieu of, I don't know if you know of Oakland's House, which is actually a place slightly off campus, but due to the demand of people needing rehearsal spaces and such like, they kind of let us, I think it was last year, I used it quite a lot, kind of use rooms in Oakland's House to do practical things, practice pieces and discuss, kind of show works in progress to tutors and things like that. They'd put chairs in the rooms and stuff like that so you could sit down and have meetings. And so, maybe it's because they kind of wanted to kind of claim that back as offices, because it is a lot of administration kind of goes on in there as well. And then kind of this new building would kind of take over from that. I don't know, it's just something that came to my head, and it would kind of make sense. It being a very old kind of office-driven building, really, not really suitable for that sort of thing, but they kind of made it into that for a temporary measure, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm going to kind of dive in on something that you said there. You mentioned the word old. Of course, the university is quite old itself. Do you think that's part of its charm, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I like it. I like the fact that one of my favourite places in the uni is actually University House, and I hardly ever get to go there these days. But when I first came to the uni, pretty much all my seminars were in University House. And as you know, at the back of University House, there is also that kind of garden area, which is really nice as well.
Yeah, I remember, yes.
It's not private or anything, so you can go and sit there whenever you want. And it looks like an old building, but it's not like in the crumbling sense, do you know what I mean? It still looks...
Oh, it's
the
still...
architecture is still nice.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I'm not a big fan of it, but that whole thing of turning the library into this kind of mixture of a coffee shop and a reading area and a discussion area, they kind of put it all into one, didn't they? Do you think that's progress in a way, or do you think that is something that really shouldn't be there?
Me personally, I was talking with someone in the library about this the other day, who is doing her PhD at the moment, a mature student. We were both saying how we're not really great fans of the fact that the library has now become this Costa. Obviously, you've got the Costa downstairs, and then obviously, as you say, the different areas, the group study areas, and the so-called quiet areas, which aren't really quiet, and the silent area. And we were both saying how it makes it difficult for us sometimes if we really want to get into study mode, and kind of all you can hear is people kind of drinking coffee and eating cupcakes on the table next to you. And then, of course, there is the option on the very top floor to have, I think there's about 6 rooms or so, like individual study rooms, but you have to book them out in advance, and you can only book them out for a certain number of hours. But, you can have that space, but they're not soundproof spaces. But, that is helpful But yeah, we just think that sometimes maybe it makes it a little too casual, and then it's kind of, I always feel bad for the cleaners that kind of have to come around afterwards if people have left mess, Whereas if you go, as I do sometimes, to other unis as a visiting scholar to use their library, the rules can be a lot more strict, so they don't tend to allow food at all on the levels where the books are, which is, a good idea in my opinion, but obviously you are allowed bottled water and things like that. And if you want to eat, you can go downstairs. Yeah, I guess they wanted to make it a more comfortable environment, and it's that kind of question of how comfortable is too comfortable, and if there's such a thing as too casual, which in my book I think there is, but I mean, I'm just one person, and I'm probably a lot older. I mean, I don't think necessarily most of the undergraduates would think that way. I think they would be quite pleased for that kind of freer environment, because as an undergraduate it is a lot more social in a way.
Before I move on to the next round, I should say that obviously when you moved from undergraduate to postgraduate, you have to go through kind of a transition period, I think. What would you suggest to somebody, or what would you say to somebody who was thinking of making that jump?
I would say make sure that you kind of look at the reading list before you go into the postgraduate step, as it were. I mean, we all look at reading lists before we start uni with the best of intentions, and I know that I did, and perhaps I didn't get through as much of it as I would have liked to at the beginning. I think with postgraduate it's a lot more important that you do that with a bit more vigour, because the classes tend to be a lot smaller, and therefore you will be asked more questions. Not only that, but the books are more specialist, so they're less generalised. Well, and as I said at the beginning, it is a lot harder. Like, it is that kind of step up, like, in terms of content. Second thing I would say is make sure you have the time to do it, and think about, like, your status. Most universities offer part-time or full-time status. Part-time, of course, being you're given longer to complete the programme. And the reason why I say make sure you have the time is with postgraduate education, there is a lot more background reading and there's less times when you're actually, like, lectured to. You do have lectures, but, like, not as many. Like, it's kind of, definitely with mine, it's a lot more kind of go away and see what you can discover, and then kind of come back to us with something, rather than we're going to talk to you for 3 hours. Although that did happen. That does happen a couple of times a week or whatever. Yeah, make sure you have the time. Make sure you do the reading as much as possible to the best of your ability. And 3, explore the finance options well as well. And kind of make sure, if you are doing a job at the same time, that your employer understands that you are doing, a postgraduate course, and you will need some time off work or fit it around work. The 4th thing I would say is don't be afraid to talk to your tutors as well. Like, it's not really emphasised as it is in undergraduate education about, ask questions if you don't understand something. But what I'm saying is, don't be afraid to ask questions if you don't understand something. Just because you're in postgraduate education, they're not going to expect you to know everything. If you're struggling with something, make sure you ask, speak up, get clarification, get the lecturer's email or whatever. I know I find that easier if I'm struggling with something to, like, put it down in writing and say, this is what I'm struggling with, these particular points. And make sure you have that dialogue so that you're not, like, 2 weeks before the deadline thinking I've got to write this 7,000 word essay or something, and I still don't quite get, Make sure you have that conversation early on if you feel like you're not getting something or you're struggling with something. Just because they don't emphasise it as much doesn't mean that you shouldn't be doing that and having that conversation.
Yeah, well, definitely. There's some very good tips there, actually, and certainly the reading list thing. Certainly, when I started undergraduate, that was a very scary prospect, even at undergraduate level. So yeah, we're going to move on from that round. Thank you very much for that, and move on to the second round. Very short round this time. I think we'll do the tell me about round. I'll give you 30 seconds to tell me about a specific subject, not necessarily about education. Could literally be about anything. So, okay, I will give you 30 seconds to talk right now about folk music. That's folk music starting from now.
Okay, folk music. What I like about folk music is it tends to tell stories from very long ago, sometimes about lost cultures. So I always feel like I'm learning something. Most people think folk music is quite boring, but I beg to differ. Most people that I speak to, when I say I like folk music, you know, there's this kind of vision that they get of kind of old people in straw hats and sandals, and I would say, no, that's not the case. You know, recently I went to a concert and I met Megan Henwood, who is an up-and-coming folk artist. Go check her out if anybody's interested. She's doing this album called Head, Heart, Hand, which you can now buy. I was lucky enough to get a copy signed. It's a very personal album for her. Yeah, and there's a lot of emotion and history in folk music as well. The most famous folk duo I can think of is Show of Hands. If anybody that kind of rings a bell with you, they did a song about the MP's expense scandal.
They did.
Arrogance, Ignorance and Greed. That song has stood the test of time, and I believe it was on Daily Politics or something random a couple of years ago.
It was, yeah.
So yeah, it did get out there. Some of it, you know, not all folk songs are sad songs. Some of them, I mean, celebrate heritage as well, and just kind of this idea of kind of countryside and life, and kind of standing up for what you believe in, really. I like the folk songs that kind of have a political edge, like Arrogance, Ignorance and Greed. Don't dismiss it before you've listened. There's a lot of young people out there. Lucy Ward, she's another one that's pretty good. And her album, Delphi Has to Fly, is great. I mean, it uses lyrics from a Samuel Lover poem, actually. So it's called Fairy Boy, if anybody wants to look that up. And it's kind of about Irish legend and kind of the idea that they used to dress up young boys as girls so they wouldn't be taken by the fairies. The evil kind I'm talking about, not like the tooth fairy. And that's kind of what that song explores. And obviously not many people kind of know about that culture, so it's really interesting to me. And is that 30 seconds?
Yeah, that's
I'm
way,
sure that's way more than 30
that's about
seconds.
2 minutes, but there we go. So we'll move on to the third round, I think. Anyway, which is the What's on Your Mind round. So this is where I turn it over to you for about 5 minutes or so. I'll ask you what's on your mind.
At the moment, what is on my mind is, oh my goodness, I have to pack up pretty much everything in my uni flat for going home to my mum's place next week. And I've just discovered that most of my cardboard boxes are either falling apart or have holes in. And so I'm thinking about where I can get strong tape from to make them strong enough to put my stuff in, and how I'm going to do that in kind of less than 5 days, which is what it's going to end up being on my mind. Also, what's on my mind is how uncharacteristically hot it has been recently, and wondering how long that is going to last, to be honest. I mean, I think it was 28 degrees one day in Chichester here, which was just insane. It was so humid.
Oh, it was pretty hot.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, where has this come from? What else am I thinking about? Oh, that I mustn't forget to pay the rent that I owe, because then, you know, when it comes to graduation, there'll be a bit of a snag in there. What else am I thinking about? I'm thinking about my friend who recently had her autoimmune treatment, and I'm hoping that she feels a bit better than she did the day that I saw her, because it was a little rough. and I'm hoping that we can get together in her bungalow soon, and kind of actually spend a day together, which is not in the hospital, which will be really nice to kind of have that girly time. So I'm kind of planning that as well. I've kind of got her postcode and my postcode, and I'm trying to do like Google Maps, and like get the best routes and see if there are buses, trains, etc. How we're gonna get there and stuff like that. Anything else that I'm thinking about right now? Not really, to be honest. I'm kind of... Do you know what hit me the other day? This week, the campus is actually full because it's Goodwood week.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, I'm sure we've had that already.
Yeah.
And then in my mind, I was like, oh, there's two. There's 2 times that it happened. I don't know if you get what I mean.
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
And
there's a few
and it was
times.
like, for some reason in my mind, I hadn't like clocked that before. Maybe because I'd not been in halls this long before. Like normally, if I'm an undergraduate, I would have finished by now, so I wouldn't be encountering kind of all these people. And when they said it was Goodwood week, I was like, but we had that. Yeah. I mean, I guess if it's your thing, it's your thing. But in my mind, I'm just thinking, why do people... But literally, they go crazy. Like, literally, the whole campus is full. There is not a free room. There's even a guy in our corridor at the end, staying at the end, who's come all the way from, like, Wales or something insane. I know that doesn't seem that far, but it seemed far to me. And he was kind of like, oh, I come every year.
Yes.
I come every year for several weeks to kind of do this. And I was kind of like, wow, it's a lot more popular than I originally kind of visualised, I suppose.
Because you've been here for a while, you must have got used to that by now, like all the little quirks, certainly around Chichester.
Yeah, and like it was weird the other week how I was literally the youngest person here and I didn't understand what was going on, because all of a sudden it was like, bless them, they were ever so polite and everything, but it was like, everybody here is over 60, what is happening? And then I realised, oh, it's U3A. Anybody that doesn't know what U3A is, it's University of the Third Age, which is basically university courses for people that are a lot older, and they may have done their undergraduates like 30, 40 years ago, maybe more. They come here for different things. They do Latin, they do knitting, I think it was like every few hours there was like bridge a couple of times a day. Obviously, if you're of that age group, they love that stuff. I feel really ashamed to say that I'm not really entirely sure what it is. I mean, I've never played bridge. They get really excited. Yeah, they kind of all gather in and they get food and refreshments and they stay here, and it's sweet. It's really sweet. And they're like queues and queues of them, like with their cases. And I remember one year I had to help one of them because they didn't know... I don't know if you remember, Jamie, but it's still the card lock system.
Right, yeah.
So obviously they're used to normal house keys, and they didn't understand how to do the swipe card to get into the accommodation. Because as you know, there's a certain technique. You have to do it quickly, otherwise if the green light goes red, the lock won't unlock, essentially. So I kind of had to show one of them how to do it, because she couldn't understand how, if she put the card in, why the door wouldn't open. So, yeah, I think it's really great for them. Yeah. And it's great that they have so many different parties going in. And it's not just like young people as well. But it means it's insanely busy.
Well, yeah.
After all the undergraduates go.
And on that note, we shall end the programme.
Yeah, that sounds like a good note to end on.
Yeah, but there we are. Great note to end on. Thank you very much. And I bid you goodbye.
You've been listening to The Week Before, a weekly recorded show presented by Jamie Dyer, with this week's special guest. The announcer was Katie Harvey, and this has been an all-age media production. Thank you for listening.